So can you talk me through kind of the origins of this project and how Star Wars Outlaws came to be?
So it was very much at the end of the production for Division 2 that we were given the opportunity to collaborate with Lucasfilm Games on a Star Wars project. And obviously this is something that we were very, very excited about. Working with this IP is something I think you'll hear all developers say is a childhood dream come true. So we jumped at the chance, and very early on we started thinking about our experiences and our relationship with Star Wars and what we'd like to do within that world. And very quickly we started to identify the player fantasy that was the most interesting to us. And that player fantasy, out of all of the archetypes in Star Wars, is really the scoundrel fantasy, the outlaw fantasy. So that's the origin point. And then we went to San Francisco. We presented a pitch to Lucasfilm Games just before, maybe the week before, pandemic lockdown. So this was perfect timing because we could go into conception and start working on really fleshing out what we'd do with a paper blueprint or digital blueprint for the game.
And what was your personal history with Star Wars?
I think if you talk to most developers of a certain age, it's one of the first movies that we remember going to see at the cinema. So I was raised in England, and I can remember going to the Odeon Theatre to see the movie maybe in 1977 or early 1978, and my mind was blown. This was special effects of a level that we'd never seen before, and it was the whole spirit of exploration, mysticism, romance. It was all of these things packed into one experience. And remember, this is hard for us to remember these days, but there was no Netflix, there was no video on demand. So this was ultra rare. It lived in your memories. Your experience was anchored in that 1-2 hour event that you went to see. So extremely powerful memories of seeing it. And then it was my first VHS. It was the VHS that I watched the most. It was the foundation movie of my youth. And of course, you know, when Empire Strikes Back came out and Return of the Jedi came out, my birthday parties were bringing my friends to the movies to watch those movies. So it's a very important part of my childhood, and I think the childhood of many members of the team.
So it really was like kind of a dream come true for the team to get to work with this. It's not just like, you know, platitudes.
No.
Hyperbole.
Yeah, I genuinely believe, like, watch any interview with any member of any Star Wars dev team, they will say the same thing. And that's how powerful Star Wars is it's really talks to something foundational in our cultural upbringing, if you will. So not to be, you know, intellectual, it's very, very powerful though.
So what about the scoundrel archetype was so appealing to the team?
I think it's the one archetype that has so much potential in terms of gameplay and gameplay fantasy. There are so many things that you can do with this archetype. Very early on, what we were trying to work out was how do we create a gameplay experience with a multitude of different possibilities? Because we always knew we wanted to do a huge open world game and have, you know, space travel, hyperdriving, several planets, several locations to explore. So within that gameplay structure framework, what sort of fantasy allowed us to do many, many different things? And the one that we kept going back to was the scoundrel. It's not just the fighting, it's not just the sneaking, it's the fisticuffs, it's the cantinas, it's the underworld, and it's all of the sort of fun, matinee action aspects that we kind of fell in love with in the original Star Wars as well. So this is really what we were the most excited to explore.
And I think that when most people think about Star Wars, they immediately go to Jedi, right? And we've seen that a lot in video games already. You know, one of the biggest current running Star Wars franchises is a Jedi game. So what about the scoundrel archetype was enough to kind of bring you away from that kind of maybe like, not like easy target, but like the conventional choice?
I genuinely think it's part of who we are as a team. It's when we were thinking about it, our favorite character wasn't Luke Skywalker, it was Han Solo in the movies. It was the outlaw, the scoundrel, traveling the galaxy, dodging one syndicate to pay off another syndicate, and traveling with his best friend Chewbacca. I mean, that was our favorite character of those original movies. So for us, I mean, Jedis are fantastic, but they didn't even enter the picture at that point.
Yeah, I think that's kind of a really important point from that original trilogy especially is, you know, everybody thinks of Star Wars, they immediately think of Jedi with lightsabers and everything, but then you ask people who their favorite character is, it's usually Han Solo.
Absolutely. So that was the challenge though. It was, okay, you have this open world framework, you have this player fantasy. How do we create a character that is compelling and interesting and powerful enough not to be in the shade of all of these incredible other scoundrels, from Han Solo, but you could look at Indiana Jones, James Bond. There are lots of scoundrels in popular media. And that's where Kay Vess was born. And the journey of Kay Vess is really a journey of a coming of age story, going from a street thief to a fully fledged scoundrel that's well known and kind of respected and feared by the syndicates.
Looking at Massive's history, all the games they've developed, the Division series, Avatar, what about the studio's history makes this the team to build this game and make it the best it could possibly be?
I think that's a great question, and there's going to be maybe some post-rationalization here, but the few things that I think were incredibly useful for us to rely on was our open world experience, our shooter experience, but also the creation of really tangible locations. The world's creation aspect of things, our recreations of New York and Washington, D.C., but post-pandemic, are something that we took enormous care and pride into creating. So here it's taking the open world and combining it with the sort of tech and power of Snowdrop, I think were the starting point for this sort of thinking.
And what about Snowdrop enables this game to kind of reach the heights that you're hoping?
So Snowdrop is an engine, a framework that's built here in Massive. And it's built around the game experiences that we need. So if we want to push things a little bit in terms of visuals, in terms of the efficiency of the streaming, for massive open worlds, to be able to have a speeder experience, a ship experience, we can do that. It's an engine that will support the game experiences that we can dream up. So that's ideal. And I don't think there's another technology out there that can do this kind of thing.
Mm. And I still remember that first demo that was given for Snowdrop with the first Division game, and just being in awe of the demo and like the way the light is coming through the bullet holes in the wall and everything. And I guess how has the engine kind of evolved to reach the point that we have like right now, as opposed to that demo that we were all that's like lodged so firmly in our memory now?
So I think it's grown in the sense that many more projects are using Snowdrop within Ubisoft now, but it's also grown according to our needs, as in Avatar's needs and Star Wars Outlaws needs. Because when you think of the Division, it's a very focused, large-scale open world, very detailed, but there are no vehicles. So adding vehicles, adding a speeder, adding a wide open world, several of them connected by hyperdrive lanes and space flight, that's something that Snowdrop's allowed us to do. So graphically, we still have the same sort of really great lighting, attention to detail, lots and lots of props and detail within the environments that we create. But on top of that, we've added a whole suite of technological advances that allow us to recreate a cinema experience. So you may have seen, we presented the game in ultra wide, and that's part of our commitment to make one of the most cinematic games of all time. And that's just the first step. On top of that, we have lenses, we have processing effects like lens flares, film grain, vignetting, just to recreate this incredible theater-like experience of the first movies.
And you touched on something that's very interesting about this game to me, which is it's not just a third-person action game. There's the speeder, there's all this traversal that you can do, there's space flight, which was very unexpected for me the first time I saw it. Why was it important to include all these disparate parts into one cohesive experience?
I think that's the player fancy of the Outlaw. It really is when you think of what would I like to do as an outlaw in Star Wars. It is stealth, it is combat, it is fisticuffs, it is hanging out at the cantina and having choices, meaningful choices as a scoundrel, as an outlaw. It is flying, it is jumping on your speeder and going from one settlement to another. It's all of those things. So it was important for us to have that ambition, that kind of wild ambition, and push not just the technology, but also the design team to have all of those things at the highest possible quality level.
And what about Kay makes her the perfect protagonist for this game?
I think she's a much more modern protagonist than we usually see in games. She's somebody who is very much a street thief, who gets thrown into things that are beyond her control and that she has to kind of fake her way out of. And that makes it a little bit more relatable than somebody who has all the confidence and sarcasm and just comes off as somebody who is not believable. So having her be relatable in that way was something extremely important for us.
So I know we can't go too much into story or spoilers or anything like that, but can you talk to me a little bit about Kay's backstory and kind of the journey that she's about to embark on?
We find Kay as a street thief who's down on her luck. She only has her companion, Nix, a Merkel that she can trust. And she accepts a job that is perhaps a little bit too dangerous, too risky for her. And somehow a series of events happens and she gets a bounty placed on her head by one of the most powerful syndicates in the galaxy. And that, really is the beginning of her steps into the larger galaxy, and that leads her from a lowly street thief to a legendary scoundrel.
And I guess that leads right into the next part, which is tell me all about Nix.
So Nix is a creature we created in a very close collaboration with Lucasfilm Games. And it's a brand new creature for Star Wars. And the sort of process there is to think about what we needed Nix for in terms of gameplay as an extension of Kay's abilities. We really considered them as a scoundrel thief duo. And Nix is absolutely adorable, loving towards Kay, but very fierce and protective as well. So he has those two sides to his personality. And we're very, very proud of what we created.
And in my gameplay session that I got to do yesterday, I was actually surprised by how integrated into the entire experience, whether it was stealth or combat or even just traversal, that Nix was. Why was that kind of the approach the team took to really just have Nix be a key component, not just a companion, but a key component of every gameplay aspect?
We always imagined them as a duo, always together, always acting together. Really symbiotic relationship between the two. It was incredibly important for us that that was how we presented the gameplay.
And when you're designing the story of this game and you're kind of laying out like the main campaign content, what is the philosophy that you take when you're like setting aside like kind of the mission structure of how you want to go about designing these I guess main story missions, the mainline missions that you're going to be taking part in?
So we This is a great question. It's and I don't know how to answer this without going into sort of dev behind the scenes things, but we really start out with who the character is, what the player fancy is, and the fixed points that we know that we're going to have to go through. And those create these tentpole moments within the campaign. Within that, we have lots and lots of moments to allow the player for self-expression, for their agency to be able to explore any one of our locations or any one of the different places that we've created. But it has to be a roller coaster ride between those moments. It has to really take you by the hand and involve you in this story of this thief turned legendary scoundrel.
Mm. And when you're creating side content for this giant open world game, how do you pace it so well that like it feels like it's just a part of her journey, even though it's completely optional in most cases?
So another great question. It's how the sausage is made as well. There are several different types of, let's say, side content. There's not just the contracts that you can pick up in cantinas that can influence your reputation with any one of the syndicates, but it's also side adventures with characters that you can meet in the streets, in the settlements, in the cantinas as well. But it's also things in the open world that will attract your attention, and those really belong to the living world system. So it's a dynamic world that you'll be stepping into, with factions maybe fighting against the Empire, maybe fighting amongst themselves. There'll be stories that'll create around you that you can choose to engage in or not.
Mm. And when you're working with all these different syndicates, you're impacting the reputation that you have with those different factions that exist within this world. Can you talk to me about how this reputation system works?
Absolutely. So one of the key things of being a scoundrel, an outlaw, is that you live and die by your reputation with the syndicates. And you'll be able to pick up jobs for the syndicates, and some of those jobs will, propose to rip off another syndicate or help with a smuggling route, that type of thing. And you can choose to do those for the syndicate, or maybe keep a little for yourself, and every single decision in those missions will affect your reputation with all of the syndicates. So it really is about spinning plates and making sure that you're not in too bad stead with any one of them, because if you do get in a bad reputation with them, they'll send assassins after you, and that you really don't want. If you do get in a great relationship with them, then you get access to special contracts, special missions, better prices at faction vendors, and even access to faction territories, which are these sort of forts within cities or in the open world where there are special opportunities for you too.
Now, is there a way to kind of max out all of the syndicates at once, or is it always going to be some give and take?
I've never managed it, but I'm sure it's possible. Usually it's give and take, but there's always ways to raise your reputation with the factions too, with the syndicates too.
And can you give me some examples of how you might raise your reputation or even lower your reputation with these syndicates?
Let's say we have a great example of one of the missions in Miragana. One of the huts, a hired gun for the huts, contacts you in a cantina and says, "We need you to help disrupt this smuggling route of pirate Rabunga hides, which are one of the creatures that we invented. So it's a special kind of leather that the pikes have dominated in terms of the smuggling routes. So the huts want to disturb that. You can choose to disturb it for the huts, but you'll also get an offer right in the middle of the quest to hand it over to the Crimson Dawn. And that's going to affect your relationship with either one of those factions, those syndicates.
And can you talk me through kind of like the different motivations that the syndicates have?
we tried to find locations that really represented a stronghold of one of the Syndicate's activities. So Toshara, which is the moon that we created with Lucasfilm Games, that's a pike enclave. And the pikes are smugglers, they're fairly brutal warlords, but they have their interest in smuggling routes. The Hutts, they're based on Tatooine. Their leader, Jabba, is one of the characters, the canon characters that you'll meet. They're very brutal. They're what you see is what you get with the Hutts. They also have smuggling routes, but they're very much concentrated on Tatooine. You'll also meet the Crimson Dawn that are a little bit everywhere, and the Ashiga clan that are based on Kijimi. And the Ashiga clan is a old dynasty that is looking to expand outside of Kijimi.
And can you talk to me about like what the process is like to like create an entirely new planet with Lucasfilm Games?
It's really, really fun. And it was a process that taught us that no matter how much you think you know about Star Wars, you don't know enough about Star Wars. And there is a beauty and a simplicity in terms of the design of every single one of those locations that we've really learnt a lot from. It has to be familiar. It has to be something that you could almost recognize on Earth, but there's always a twist. And in the case of Toshara, it's these huge streaks of amberine, an amber-like material that's translucent, that forms part of the landscape, but it's also within the cities. The city is carved in a mountain. It's very windswept. Everything is very familiar, and yet there's a twist that makes it uniquely Star Wars.
Mm. And I guess like that wasn't the only original creation that you had. You had to create a new ship for Kay. You had to create basically a whole new syndicate, the Ashiga clan. So like, what is the collaboration, like the back and forth with Lucasfilm Games, especially because like there's so much lore you also have to keep in mind for every little bit, with this especially taking place between arguably the two most iconic entries in the Star Wars film franchise. So like, what is that back and forth like with Lucasfilm?
So every week we have several calls with them where we share what we'd like to do, the intentions, and they challenge us. And we do a back and forth like that over several weeks to be able to get the shape language right, to get the lore right, to make sure that it becomes part of Star Wars canon. So the Ashiga clan is part of Star Wars canon now. Toshara is part of Star Wars canon now. And that's super gratifying when you help design a creature that's as lovable and fierce as Nyx, and it becomes part of one of the most storied IPs in the world.
I mean, thinking back to when you were having your birthday parties at the movie theater, imagine if Toshara ever shows up in a Star Wars movie.
Absolutely. Or, even Nyx being part of the universe and seeing Nyx be loved as much as we love him.
I mean, it's not unheard of. We've seen a droid that looks like BD-1 from Star Wars Jedi Survivor pop up in, what was it, The Mandalorian Season 3, I think?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, that was great. It was awesome seeing like characters from the video games make the leap over to the movies.
That's the power of this property, is being able to work on small pieces that become part of a much larger whole and bring a sort of galaxy of substance in general.
And can you talk to me about like the speeder gameplay? Because I was actually struck by how good it feels to just kind of speed around. What were the inspirations the team took to make that?
So the speeder, we knew as an outlaw, as a scoundrel, you needed a tool to grow your access within these planets and moons that we've created. So we wanted to create a speeder. And when you think of the different kinds of speeders, they all have inspirations from the real world. They could be hot rods, they could be choppers, they could be Vespers. We wanted a dirt bike because of the fun, the gameplay, the sort of stunts, the speed. That was really our focus. So we took inspiration from a classic Swedish dirt bike, but that was our point of origin, is this is the gameplay we want. this is the real world inspiration. How do we create that? And we really worked very closely with Lucasfilm Games to be able to get something that feels uniquely Star Wars.
You know, if you're implementing these traversal options, like not even taking into account the space flight, which just blows out the scope so much, but like even just having a speeder being an option, that means you have to make this world and have so much stuff populating it so it's interesting. You're not just speeding around an empty landscape. So I guess once the team decided to do this, like how did that change the approach that the developers had to make to like create this giant world?
I think that those are lessons that we learn as well, to create road networks and networks of passages that were not off-road, that were just for traversal. And then it influences how we design the open world events and how those events interact with themselves. So an Empire checkpoint will be able to try and stop you if you run through it. There'll be some shipjackers or pirates on the road that'll try and rob you. There's a lot of different things that come into creating a landscape, the road network in that landscape, and the living world events that populate that landscape.
Now, how does your reputation affect these living events out in the world?
So if you have a good reputation with the pikes, let's say, and you run into a pike ambush, maybe they'll let you pass. But if you run into a small skirmish between the pikes and the Crimson Dawn, if you help out the Crimson Dawn, that's going to influence your pike reputation negatively. So it's all interconnected, if you will.
And when I was playing around in Toshara, I had the option to, you know, steal a part from either the Crimson Dawn or the Pikes, and I had already gotten in good with Crimson Dawn, so I went ahead and stole from Crimson Dawn because I could get in easier. Now, if I am awful at stealth and ended up getting caught, so I'm sure that negatively impacted my standing with them. However, if I were to go in there and like not get caught, would they even have any idea, or like would my reputation take a hit at all?
Absolutely none. So, you know, it's only a crime if you get caught, and your reputation is only affected if you get caught.
So can you talk me a little bit through like how you can do like these ebbs and flows with your reputation and what ultimately that impacts out in the world?
So your reputation will be influenced fairly naturally throughout the golden path of the game, the story missions, the story quests that we've built. There'll always be choices between a couple of different factions. So one of our missions takes place in a Empire space station, and you're there to steal information for the Pikes. But you can choose to give it to Crimson Dawn, and that will influence your reputation amongst those two factions. But if you want to build up your reputation afterwards with the Crimson Dawn even further, there'll be contracts that you can find not just in the cantinas, but also in Crimson Dawn locations too. Some specific areas that you'll only be able to access if you're in good stead with the Crimson Dawn. And we have faction territories for a lot of the different, all of the different syndicates that contain not just distractions, contracts, vendors, but also a vault in the center. And the vault is something that contains precious materials for you, or precious objects for you, but you'll only be able to steal from that. So you'll only be able to break into it. No matter how good your reputation is, you'll never be able to get into the vault without breaking in.
So one thing that kept coming up yesterday when we were having those extended conversations were kind of the concept of your actions have consequences. How did you go about implementing, you know, consequences of actions and ways that feel meaningful, not binary, something that feels adaptive in an organic way?
So I think there's always risk, consequences, and rewards. And the rewards, they're very tangible. They're, you know, things that you can get for cheaper, exclusive items, missions that you couldn't unlock without great reputation. But on the negative side, it's also this punitive aspect of the world is a little bit shut off to you. Without you being in great reputation with some of the factions, some of the syndicates, you won't be able to access those locations. And that's a powerful motivator. An even more powerful motivator is not being followed by assassins and having to get rid of assassins. That's really motivating for you not to be in a terrible relationship with any of the syndicates.
Do you think we'll know any of the assassins if we're Star Wars fans?
I don't think so. These ones are ones that we created specifically for the game.
So I'm assuming that there's got to be, we've seen in some of the trailers, you know, characters that we've recognized in other Star Wars media. Do you think we should expect to see other Star Wars characters?
There are a few canon Star Wars characters that we'll meet across the adventure.
And I'm assuming based on the placement of this being between Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, some of the old heads will be very excited about some of those appearances.
Old heads and young heads, let's hope.
So why was the placement between Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi the route that the team took?
It was actually suggested to us by Lucasfilm. We pitched the concept of an open world scoundrel outlaw adventure, and for them, they thought about it a little bit, and they came back to us with, okay, there is this perfect moment, 1 year between Empire and Jedi, where the rebels are in retreat. The Empire is all powerful, but the syndicates are taking more and more liberties. They're taking more and more space because of this chaos in the galaxy. And that's the perfect moment for a scoundrel to thrive and to start their journey as, you know, somebody who's going to become legendary.
And where did you look in terms of like reference for not only the story, but just anything lore related to Star Wars Outlaws? Because, you know, that's such an area of Star Wars that's ripe for storytelling. So where did you kind of look for your primary references?
I think, I mean, our narrative team is extremely passionate about Star Wars and read the novels, read a lot of materials. Lucasfilm Games has a narrative team that was incredibly useful for us to help guide us, but also to give us access to materials that we needed. So narratively, I think the movies were the first step, and then there's a lot in the animated series, there's a lot in the books. Aftermath, which is a book we talk about a lot, features Akiva. And that's one of the locations that we've built out for the game. So lots of different locations for lots of different things. Even the lens project that I was talking about, this tech that we have that makes things cinematic, that's very much inspired by Rogue One and their take on the original trilogy, which is original trilogy but with today's technology.
And you know, you talked about how kind of like the pikes and the huts and everything were kind of inspiring of the locations that you chose, because you know they needed to serve these syndicates that you wanted to implement into the game. What other considerations were taken into consideration to which planets you wanted to include in the game?
I think every single one had to be a microcosm of not just syndicates and syndicates, you know, intrigue and back and forth and warring, but also there had to be some Empire presence. The Empire is extremely important. I mean, this is the moment where the Empire is everywhere. And we do have systems, the Wanted system, where, you know, messing around with the Empire has huge consequences too. So those were the key things that we were looking for. Locations that were fun to traverse, locations that were diverse, that could lead to a real variety in environments, in weather, in just the fun of being able to travel on a speeder too. So, you know, Tatooine will feel incredibly different from Akiva.
And with kind of the traversal, you know, the speeder we've already talked about. We're going to get to the space flight in a second here, but Kay actually has like a pretty diverse array of traversal when she's on foot as well. Can you talk me through her arsenal there? Yeah,
she's a thief. and she's a kind of a cat burglar. So she's used to climbing, she's used to using a grappling hook to be able to swing into first floor, second floor apartments and being able to steal from there. So she can sneak, she can take cover, there's a lot of things that she's able to do just to get around.
And going to the space flight, I guess now, like, you know, there's a very unique mechanic that is used where it's like, it almost seems like there's like a buffer zone outside of the planet where you can fly up there and then explore freely in your ship. And then if you want to leave that area, jump to hyperspace. Can you talk to me about the kind of inspiration behind that?
Absolutely. This is problem solving for video games, basically. It's every planet we wanted to have an orbit around it with lots of different points of interest, things to do, battles to get in, places to explore even. So the orbits for each one of the moons or planets that we created had to be populated with lots of different things. And we didn't want to create endless space. So you hyperdrive from orbit of a planet to an orbit of a planet. So all of the space areas that we have are full of things to do.
When you're creating this game, you know, the Pikes have shown up very recently in Book of Boba Fett in a pretty prominent role. Did their depiction in that have the team, like, I'm assuming that the game was in pretty early development when that show aired, did that depiction like influence a direction that the team wanted to take it all, or was it already pretty set in stone because of your collaboration with Lucasfilm?
It was pretty much set in stone because of the collaboration. I think the Pikes were also featured in Solo, so we had some visual references. We were very excited about the potential of using them as a criminal syndicate. They're super inspiring as a faction. Visually, behavior-wise, there's a lot of things we could do there.
What is the appeal of the underworld? Because it seems like this is just like kind of the core driver is you just want the underworld of Star Wars to be kind of like this playground for the player. So what about it was so attractive to the team?
I think it's the possibilities, the gameplay possibilities, the smuggling, the backstabbing, the syndicates, the theft, all of the potential verbs, gameplay verbs that we could explore through that. But it's also the characters. The characters in the underworld of Star Wars are amazing. So not only do you have people like Jabba the Hutt, but you've got Gorak for the Pikes. You've got these larger-than-life characters that are the underpinning of all of these different syndicates. And that's just amazing to explore.
Well, I can't wait to explore it. I mean, the taste that I got yesterday was definitely enough to whet my appetite. And thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me about Star Wars Outlaws. I can't wait to play it.
Thank you for coming to Sweden.